Hi there, welcome to Photoshop. It is going to be a quick lesson here, all things considered, since Photoshop is a giant program. I've seen a Photoshop tutorial book that was fatter than a big King James version of a Bible, so there's a lot in this program. But my goal is to try to get you all at a point where you can start using it really effectively without necessarily having spent a ton of time in it. So yeah, first things first, when you are opening up the Photoshop for the first time, you will be given some sort of box that looks like this, and it wants to know what kind of file you want to make. I happen to have opened up an image, so I don't really necessarily need that, and you can always close it if that's your intention. Here, there's some basic things that you should be aware of. I don't have anything there. These are some real basic formats that are typical for photography. So you're welcome to start there with something that is more standard, like a 4x6 or an 8x10, something like that. Just as an FYI, in case you're unfamiliar with the term, landscape means horizontal, and portrait means vertical. So it's hard, it's annoying because you can't really see a true representation of here, but portrait just means vertical, it's taller than it is wide. Landscape means it's wider than it is tall. So landscape or horizontal, interchangeable, portrait and vertical, interchangeable. So anyway, you can either choose a preset, one of these ones over here, and you can go into print and decide if there's anything more standard you'd like from there, and basically go through here. Some of you guys are going to be thinking more in pixels, some of you guys will be thinking more in inches or centimeters. It just depends on what your intention for the piece to be is. What I want you to notice here is for the web stuff is at 72 ppi, which means pixels per inch. And on contrast, for photos, these are 300, meaning there's a lot more compact information, more pixels per inch than in the web stuff. So just be aware of that. You will have to, if you're going to just make up your own, you need to make sure that you know what this is for. Always better to start off higher if you're not quite sure all the uses of it. If it's possible that it will be used for print, you make darn sure that this thing is at least 300 at the size in which you would intend to print. Those are just some important little pieces to think about. So I'm just going to start off with, let's see, I'll just do a photo, landscape 4x6, it's not that big. And here you'll see some information about it. We've got it in inches. If you prefer to think of it in something other than inches, of course you can choose whatever one you want here. But generally I would say that if you're working with the web, you're probably thinking more in pixels. If you're working with print, you're thinking in inches and centimeters, etc. The orientation here, you can see you can flip-flop the width and the height. You can see here's portrait, here's landscape. We'll go ahead and click artboards so we can take a look at what that means later. Resolution we'll keep at 300. Pixels per inch is fine. Again, if you want to think in centimeters, you're welcome to do that. RGB color is fine. We don't really need to talk too much about that yet, but your choices typically are going to be CMYK or RGB. And we will definitely get into that more when we talk about color in depth, but for now, RGB is acceptable. It stands for red, green, blue. CMYK will stand for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. And we'll get into that. And then 8-bit's absolutely fine. I wouldn't mess with this. It's high enough resolution. And you get to choose what color background you want. White's typical, black's fine. Background color, you get to choose whatever color that you want here. Now, just because if you decide later on that you want a red background, that's a real easy thing. You do not have to start with this here. But if you know in advance, ahead of time, then you can go ahead and do that. The color profile, I would just keep it as the default that it is. There occasionally, some photographers are going to be very particular, and they need a particular profile to go with their printer, and so they might have something other than the defaults. But don't worry about that for us in this class. We are not going to get that advanced. And square pixels is fine. These are different formats for different parts of the world. Again, I would just recommend that you stick with the defaults for these. And after you muddle through some of this first part, then you can always also name your file. And it's not saved yet, but it does start off with a name. And you just hit create, and this makes a nice new file for you. Now again, I had already had photographs open. If that's your intention, you can just go to File, Open, find your photograph. Looks like it's going to take a bit. So it's being stubborn. There we go. And then you can simply choose, whatever files you need to from that area. I downloaded a few here, so I'll just go ahead and open up another one so you can see that process. There we go. I take a lot of nature photography, so this is kind of stuff that I brought up for use in class. Now, you can see, well, let me do one step back. Another way to open up a file is to actually go to your desktop, and you can simply drag the file. You can't see that on my screen, so I won't bother showing you, but you can also drag an icon of a file you want onto the icon of the Photoshop, either in your menu, either on the side or bottom where you've positioned your menu. And that will also launch a file open. Otherwise, again, just file open, and that will do the trick just fine. So when Photoshop is open and you've got multiple files, it shows them in tab view here. That's the default system. However, if you would like to see them differently, you can go over here to Window and change how they arrange themselves. I have 3 files up, so it makes sense to choose 3. If you have a lot more, you could be in a little bit of trouble, but you can see some basic defaults. It wouldn't even show the 4 and 6 because I don't have any files open. So I'll do stack so you can see what that looks like. And it's stacking them the best way that it knows how. And if you don't like that, you can simply go back and consolidate all to tabs, and then you can get them back in that format. So yeah, that's just a real brief introduction into opening Photoshop.